Cardiovascular disease is an umbrella term for all types of diseases that affect the heart or blood vessels. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, cardiovascular disease, also known as CVD, is the leading cause of death in the United States. This is primarily due to poor diet, lack of physical activity, obesity, and other chronic conditions. Fortunately, by making healthy lifestyle changes, you can significantly reduce your risk for CVD by maintaining a healthy weight, incorporating physical activities, and eating foods that are healthy and nutritious. On today's episode of the Wellness Minute, we'll be exploring prevention and management of CVD through integrative health practices such as naturopathic medicine, integrative nutrition, and herbal medicine. Welcome to another episode of the Wellness Minute. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Pille. Earlier I mentioned CVD is the leading cause of death in the United States, but there are many ways to manage and prevent these diseases from occurring, whether it's thinking about yourself or someone that you love. Here with me today, we have Dr. Amina Keats, a naturopathic doctor who practices at our Natural Care Center at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. Thank you for coming in to join us today, Dr. Keats. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just launch right in. For those of us who haven't heard of CVD, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So CVD, or cardiovascular disease, is, as you mentioned, an umbrella term which encompasses diseases that involve the actual heart muscle as well as the blood vessels. So there are a lot of diseases that fall underneath this category, but the most commonly diagnosed cardiovascular disease in this country is coronary artery disease, or CAD. And with CAD, what happens is there's an atherosclerotic process that blocks the coronary arteries, which means that the blood can't be delivered to the heart as it should, which can actually lead to other cardiovascular diseases like heart attack or heart failure, stroke, or peripheral artery disease.
Okay, so that's really important to think about. Are there any warning signs that can happen that might lead you to think that your cardiovascular health needs attention?
Sure. So in terms of symptomology, you want to pay attention to unusual kind of symptoms. So obviously, if there's chest pain or tightness, we all know about the urgency of this kind of symptom. If there's upper abdominal pain, jaw pain, if there's any dizziness or extreme fatigue that doesn't make sense, or numbness or pain involving the upper or lower extremities would be alerts in terms of cardiovascular health.
Okay, so knowing some of the symptoms to look for, do you have maybe 3 tips that you could recommend to our viewers?
Sure. So the 3 that come to mind, the first would be nutrition, because we can absolutely use food as medicine. So sticking to a more anti-inflammatory diet, because there is a direct link between chronic inflammation and cardiovascular disease. So lots of leafy green vegetables, lots of, well, not lots of fruit, but a small amount of fruit. You still need fruit, but not as much as vegetables. Lean proteins are going to be important, so things like poultry and omega-3 fatty acid sources like wild salmon, wild sardines, wild herring. Nuts and seeds, healthy fats are going to be important. And then plant-based proteins are something that you want to focus on as well. So things like quinoa, legumes are going to be those healthy factors as well.
So anti-inflammatory foods are really important to heart health.
That's very important, absolutely, absolutely. Actually, there's been lots of studies showing that a Mediterranean diet, which we know now is an anti-inflammatory diet, is connected to a lower risk of cardiovascular disease and other conditions.
Okay, so we could look for a Mediterranean diet. Just Google that and see what it's all about.
Yeah, pretty simple. A lot of information out there. There are 2 other things that I wanted to stress. One is sleep hygiene. And so sleep is something that many of us neglect. In fact, a third of Americans sleep for 6 hours or less each night, and that's been directly linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So a simple kind of prescription is making sure that we sleep for 7 to 8 hours each night in a dark, quiet room. The last thing that I would recommend is exercise. So exercise is important for so many things, as we know, including reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease. So according to the CDC, we should be exercising for 150 minutes to 300 minutes a week. So really reaching for that goal and also incorporating resistance training and aerobic activity within that plan is going to be important.
Okay, so getting a good night's sleep and exercise are also going to help.
Absolutely. So much that we can do.
Okay, great. So how might a naturopathic doctor individualize care for someone who's been diagnosed with CVD?
Sure, so it's all about the person. And so really taking a thorough assessment of the patient's condition and looking at laboratory results. That's going to be very important. So what do their cholesterol levels look like? What do the blood sugar levels look like, and other important factors. Taking a physical examination, really looking at blood pressure, what does that look like? Collecting all that information, and then also looking at these important kind of health pillars that we need to optimize. So things like nutrition and physical activity, sleep hygiene, stress management, these things are all going to be very important when it comes to individualizing a plan. The other thing that we want to think about is integration. So if a patient is already taking a medication for cardiovascular disease, we want to make sure that the natural medicine is complementing that care. And so collaborating with that patient's cardiologist or primary care provider is going to be very important as well.
So you're looking at the person from different points of view?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, you heard the expert, and we got a lot of sound advice for preventing and managing CVD. Dr. Keats, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, we're going to spill the beans on the importance of nutrition, especially related to cardiovascular health. Stay tuned. Hello again. Before the break, we had an insightful conversation with Dr. Keats about cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular health, and naturopathic medicine. With us now is Carla Johnston, a practicing clinical nutritionist at the Natural Care Center. Thank you, Carla, for coming in today.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's good to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
All right. So, Carla, from your perspective as a nutritionist, what does it mean to have good cardiovascular health?
There are many things that I think of when I think of cardiovascular health. The first is eating nutritious foods, eating foods that support your body. Secondly, having a weight that supports you, so you want to really look at weight management. Obesity is ever increasing in this country. Staying physically active, being connected to other folks, that's also really important. And then eliminating those risks that can increase cardiovascular disease, and one of those might be smoking.
Okay, so I thought we might just circle back and talk a little bit about nutrition.
Sure.
Maybe heart-healthy foods and fats. There's a lot out there about different kinds of fats. What do you see as what's healthy?
Yeah, so fats are in the news a lot, and it is part of a healthy diet, especially for cardiovascular disease. So if you're eating the right types of fat, or what we would consider to be healthy fats, that can also reduce inflammation and also boost the good types of cholesterol, the HDL, and reduce the LDLs, which is not so good cholesterol. So there's a different type of fat. A saturated fat is one type of fat, for example. So saturated fats are what we think of with processed foods, some meats and cheeses, and that can create inflammation. So we really, with cardiovascular disease and actually many types of illnesses, we want to stay away from and eliminate those as much as we can. Unsaturated fats, or like the omega-3 fats, are ones that we definitely want to include in our diet. And so when you think of omega-3s, you might think salmon or sardines. There's also some nuts and seeds, like flax seeds are good in those, and they actually promote heart health. And with heart health, we want to increase circulation and minimize inflammation, and those do that.
How about my favorite, avocados?
Avocados are full of omega-3s, and they're also really popular right now and easy to find.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep eating them.
Absolutely.
So we talked about fats. Could you tell us a little bit more about heart-healthy foods?
So when you look at your plate, what you want to see are colors of the rainbow. You want to see a variety of colors and also textures. And you want to take a look at the ratios. So for example, you want the majority of your plate to be filled with plant-based foods or vegetables. You want to include vegetables, you want to include fruits, you want to include lean proteins, whole grains. Many people forget about nuts and seeds, which can also be heart healthy. They provide all of these good nutrients and vitamins, as well as some antioxidants, which would be promoting cardiovascular health.
Okay, so now that we have a better idea about heart-healthy foods and fats, what are some things that we might want to avoid or limit so we can have a heart-healthy diet?
So what you want to try to avoid as much as possible are pre-processed foods. What ends up happening a lot of times in those pre-processed foods is they're pretty high in sugars. Some of the saturated fat levels are pretty high, which is what we talked about we want to avoid. Sodium as well. So for example, for someone with hypertension, sodium is a concern. And so when you mention that, some people will think of a salt shaker. However, in processed foods, when you look at the label, one serving can be as much as half of an entire day's serving of sodium in just one serving. So you want to, as much as possible, prepare your own foods. And then again, you want to incorporate it in as variety. So if you're having a plate, you want to make sure that you have your whole grains and that you can see your fruits and vegetables. And some people, when they think of protein, will immediately assume that means animal protein. However, lentils and quinoa are also full of protein and are not animal-based. So you want to avoid the processed and eat as much as you can with foods that you prepare yourself.
Okay, so that's a lot to take in.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking about the rainbow on your plate and what you put on there. So there's a last question I wanted to ask you, which is about change. And how do you change the way you eat?
So I always say start where you are. So if you're not a vegetable eater, challenge yourself to try one vegetable. Add it to each meal. If you do eat vegetables, you might challenge yourself to eat a different type of vegetable, to try something new. The same would go true with fruits. If you're not a big fruit eater, you might want to add some fruit if you're able to have that in your diet. The second is experiment with some whole grains. A lot of people, when you mention whole grains, will immediately think of rice, but there are some other wonderful grains that are also heart healthy that you could certainly add to your diet. Then I would say experiment. You know, we're coming into the time of year where there are colors everywhere, and farmers markets are going to start to sprout up. So it's a great time to just go out and explore. So you're getting some walking in, which is also physical. And what you also can do is talk with those who have booths there. So if you're not sure how to prepare something, talk with them on what it tastes like or how you might prepare it so that you could add that into your meal. So start where you are and just incrementally add some small changes that you know you can continue to build on.
Okay, so start with small changes.
Start small.
And mix it up, make it interesting, go to the farmer's market.
Yes, food's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's supposed to be delicious. And so by experimenting, you might find some things that you hadn't known before.
Okay, great. So Carla, is there anything else that you might like to tell us about nutrition and cardiovascular health?
So one last thing with nutrition and cardiovascular health is once you start building your diet to where it's nourishing, you will actually start to feel better and you will sleep better most often, which will also help you to move more. So it really is a circle. So once you jump in that circle with nutrition, many other things help to balance out as well.
So one small change can make a lot of other changes happen as well.
It really can make it easier.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much, Carla, for coming into the studio today and imparting wisdom of nutrition and cardiovascular health.
Thank you.
Okay, so stay tuned. Up next, we're going to be talking about herbs and how they can support cardiovascular health. We're back. We just spoke with Carla Johnston, a practicing clinical nutrition, about the importance of good nutrition and cardiovascular health. Next up is Donna Casella, registered clinical herbalist at the Natural Care Center. She's here to give us an herbalist perspective on how herbs can help support cardiovascular system so that it can get healthy, stay healthy, and prevent CVD. Welcome to the Wellness Minute, Donna. How are you?
I'm really good, Rebecca, and I want to take a moment and just to thank you for including herbal medicine into this conversation, because herbs tend to be a little bit of a less common modality that people think about. So thanks for having me.
Okay, well, that's a great way to start. Tell us a little bit about how herbs support cardiovascular health.
Okay, so when we look at herbs, the way an herbalist determines which herbs to select, we like to think about what actions they have on the body. And if we're talking about cardiovascular health in particular, some particular actions that are useful might include some herbs that actually strengthen the heart muscle, and that is seen in maybe increasing the heart stroke to allow the blood to move more efficiently through the body. Some herbs actually help to relax and tonify blood vessels. So the blood moves more smoothly through the cardiovascular system. Some herbs are generally anti-inflammatory, which, as we know, inflammation is rampant in the body and in the cardiovascular system as well. And there are actually some other herbs that help to regulate blood sugar and blood fats, for example. So there are different herbs that can do all of those different things on the body.
Okay, so could you give us some specific examples of herbs that support cardiovascular health?
Sure. One of my favorite herbs for cardiovascular health is called hawthorn, and it's a tree. And I love hawthorn because it's one of those herbs that I mentioned that it strengthens the heart muscle. There's a lot of really good research in there that it really supports how the heart operates, and it's also just a really good tonifier. And it's also a very, very safe herb. So I use hawthorn quite a bit for people that have some cardiovascular challenges. Another herb that I really like to use, and this one actually really tastes good, is hibiscus. And hibiscus, it's a very common herb. It's used in teas a lot. It has a bright red look to it and a very tart taste that it shows up a lot. But hibiscus is really great for regulating blood pressure and blood fats, and it's really high in antioxidants, which gives it a lot of its actions.
Okay, so some great examples. How might you individualize specific herbs for people who have been diagnosed with CVD?
So as with any herbal approach, as you mentioned, every client has an individual strategy, and so what we do as trained herbalists is that we try to figure out what the root cause of an issue is, and the best way to talk about that is to give an example. And so, say in the example of cardiovascular issues, say the person has maybe heart palpitations or some increased blood pressure, and then what I'm going to do as an herbalist is I'm going to try to drill down and figure out what that cause might be, and one common cause would be stress. Maybe that person is in really a high-stress job or has a family situation, and it turns out that the stress may be causing some effects in the cardiovascular system. So I would try to uncover what the root cause of the issue is, and then I would try to pick herbs to address that root cause. And so there's some really great stress-modulating herbs that I might use in addition to some of these heart tonics as well. So the key is really trying to get to the root cause of the individual's challenges.
Okay, so you mentioned tonics. Are there other ways to consume herbs?
Right, so there are a number of options to consume herbs, and one of the most common ways is just an herbal tea formula where what I do as an herbalist is I select several different herbs and I blend them together in a tea, and then the person would basically, infuse the tea with boiling water and drink just like you would tea normally. Some people don't want to take the time to do that, or it's a hassle, and we understand that, it's not for everybody, and so we have herbal powders is another option where you're literally just eating the herbs, and maybe you're putting it in applesauce or some kind of food, and you're just ingesting the whole herb. Another format that some people like are extracts or tinctures, which is a water alcohol liquid. That's basically an infusion of the herb, and it's highly concentrated. They're very, very convenient. They're also more expensive because they're highly concentrated, and some people have challenges with alcohol, so we try to avoid that. There are additionally some tablets and capsule forms that you can go out and get. For me, as an herbalist, I prefer to use whole herbs, and I really prefer to use plants that are as least processed as possible, because I like to stay as close to the whole plant as possible. But it really the key is what the client is going to use and what's going to be best for them. So I really have to work with the client to determine what's going to work for them.
Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to take herbs. You mentioned putting some in applesauce. Are there other ways that you can use meals to get herbs?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the really great things about herbs is that they're all around us, and I really, I always talked about herbal medicine being the medicine of the people, and so I really encourage people to incorporate herbs. And if you want to talk about specifically cardiovascular health, one of my favorite herbs for cardiovascular health that we can all probably have used before is garlic. I just can't say enough about garlic. It's anti-inflammatory. It's tonifying to the cardiovascular system. It helps with blood fats and regulating blood pressure and all these really great things. And and it's great to cook with. And it's easily accessible. The only thing I would make two recommendations. One would be when you do cook with it, you want to make sure that you crush the clove, because that will break down the enzymes that activate the active enzymes that give you all these health-related advantages. And the other thing is I like to advise people to make sure everybody at the table is using garlic, because it will make you smell like garlic, and it will come through your pores. And so I tell people if everybody's eating it, then nobody really notices.
Okay. Well, that sounds like quite a delicious dinner party with garlic. So herbs are small things that can make a big difference. I'm
Absolutely.
hearing that. And is there anything else that you would like to tell our viewers about herbs and cardiovascular health?
I think just to reiterate a couple of things that I had already mentioned, but one, in general, herbs and spices just generally offer amazing health benefits. So I encourage everybody to incorporate them into their diet as much as they can. They taste great. They add flavor without adding a lot of calories and things. But the other thing too is to keep in mind that if you do have some more specific challenges that you're trying to get specific results, consider talking with a trained professional, because you'll probably get better results when you work with a coach and a partner and an herbalist. Okay,
very good. Thanks again, Donna, for coming in today to talk to us about herbs and cardiovascular health.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Okay, so we're getting ready to wrap up today's episode of the Wellness Minute. We talked about naturopathic medicine, nutrition, and herbal medicine, and how they can help us keep our heart healthy. Tune in next month when we'll be taking a deeper look into the nutrition program at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Pille, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.